Today we're going to be looking at a Spanish football legend, played for Manchester City for 10 years, was considered one of the great midfielders of his generation. Let's get into this. This is by Raymar Football on YouTube. Go subscribe to his channel. And let's learn about the most underrated Spanish footballer of all time.
In the late 90s to mid-2010s, Spain produced the greatest generation of midfielders the game of football has ever seen. And the two that come to mind most for many as some of the best midfielders of all time are without a doubt Xavi and Iniesta. But there was another who, outside of certain Premier League fans, almost never gets talked about. A man with dribbling and ball control just as elite as Iniesta, and vision and playmaking just as beautiful as Xavi. You could even argue that in Spain, he was the better.
Now, I will say this, some of these clips that he's using might end up getting my video copyrighted. I know it's wild to say, it does happen, even though he's got his video up here. So just in case there's some weird edits in here, it was copyrights. These federations are weird with how they apply their copyright pressure. By the way, I did react to his highlights already on my Patreon, so you might want to go check that out. I'm doing all the videos that would get blocked on YouTube, I'm doing over on Patreon. So I already have reacted to his skills and highlights and his dribbling ability. Class player.
Providing more assists than both Barca legends in fewer matches. Heck, even in the beginning of their international dynasty, he played even more minutes than both of them. The same guy who pushed Cesc Fabregas and Juan Mata in the best forms of their careers to the bench. David Jimenez Silva. So incredible that his playstyle and overall game was perfectly described in his nickname of the Magician.
I always say it as David makes a bad pass a good pass. You know, we call him the Magician because because he brings things down that shouldn't be brought down, and he does touches that and sees things that other people don't see.
Because when you think of Man City and how good they are now, David Silva was one of, if not the biggest factor in building the foundations for helping the club become what they are today. There's a reason why they built a statue of him before he even retired.
Really?
And I truly, honestly, and certainly believe that had he been just a few years younger, Man City with a prime David Silva, Haaland, De Bruyne, and all the other pieces they have today could have won 3 Champions League titles in a row. But before he had ever gained any popularity in the Premier League, when compared to his other high-profile Spanish teammates, I'm not exaggerating when I say that David Silva was severely underrated.
Kevin is a joke. He's a joke. He sees the game a couple of steps ahead of everyone else. You know, he's already planning his next move before the ball's come to him.
Is he the best player you played with?
No.
David was so good.
David Silva?
Yeah, David was
They all say this. They all say it.
David was so good.
Because most of Spain's golden generation of midfielders went out to start their careers in bigger clubs like Barcelona, or even outside of Spain in top clubs in the Premier League, David Silva started off much more unknown. Despite signs of his early talent, David was never really in the spotlight, and was often forced to play out of position, starting off as a goalkeeper, and then usually having to play as a winger. That was until his skills would become so undeniable that there would be some rumors about a
Alright, that man right there at goalkeeper is wasted talent. Oh my.
prodigy all the way from the furthest corners of Spain and the Canary Islands. But because of how remote he was, big clubs just never really caught on, and Silva would go relatively undetected until he joined Valencia's youth academy. His abilities were good enough to send him as a 17-year-old straight into first-team play, going on loan to clubs like Eibar and Celta Vigo.
All right,
but
so it is Eibar. I was trying to figure that out in my Patreon reaction. By the way, just a quick word from the sponsor. Hey, we'll get back to the video in just 1 second. I want to show you something cool. This is my Patreon. For $1 a month, you get an amazing perk. You get to watch full, unedited, copyright-free reactions. Over on Patreon, I can post stuff that will get claimed over here on YouTube. That'll get blocked over here on YouTube. For $1 a month, every player in this series that I've been reacting to will have a highlight video or a goals video over here on Patreon for just $1 a month, and you get to see that. If you join at $5 tier, then you get stuff like different football movies, full-length games and stuff, and the like, basically. So if you fancy supporting the channel, I would really appreciate your support over here on Patreon. Man, it's only $1 a month. Could you imagine? I've got, what, 25,000 subscribers right now? Could you imagine if I could get 1,000 of you to join at $1 a month? I could legitimately really do this full time. It would be a huge blessing, huge honor for me to be able to run this channel as my career. So if you could support me, I would really appreciate it. And back to your regularly scheduled programming. All right, so we're back.
Most was that the
I am sorry for that rude interruption.
experience would rapidly improve his game, and Valencia would quickly recall him and establish him as a regular starter, immediately playing over 50 matches at just 19 years old. In fact, in his first 2 seasons in Valencia, he would play over 100 matches, and together with David Villa, he would help carry a relatively weaker Valencia squad all the way to win the Copa del Rey. But while individually Silva might not have been making headlines in Spain, Spanish manager Luis Aragonés recognized the absolute brilliance of Silva, consistently being called up since 2007 to play in Spain's Euro qualifiers. Because if Barcelona had Xavi and Iniesta, for Valencia, David Silva played the role of both. We all know how monstrously good Barcelona was becoming in those days, and how many world-class talents they had on their squad.
Golly, look at that. Puyol, Xavi, Iniesta, Henry, Messi, Busquets. Oh my gosh, what a team.
But you could have dropped David Silva in there and he wouldn't have missed a beat. Heck, if he had played for Barcelona, I dare say a lot more casuals would rate him and put him up there on a pedestal. Because the way that Silva dribbled the ball was immaculate. His close control, touch, and overall dribbling was just so crisp and tight. He didn't have to do any skill moves or even have much speed in order to carry the ball, beat his man, and to keep possession. That's why even at times throughout his career when he had to play as a winger, it didn't matter if he lacked the pace, because his ball control was just so tight. It was all he needed to get past his man.
Look at that. How are you supposed to get the ball off this guy? He just keeps the ball. That's what he does. You don't get the ball off of this one.
Honestly, I'd have to say that Iniesta's dribbling was better, but only by the slightest of margins. And you have to imagine that Silva was doing that on a much weaker side, with a lot fewer options and support. But his dribbling was just so good that it got to the point that the harder you pressed him, the easier it was for him to beat you. Just think about that for a second. I know it might sound counterintuitive, but truly, all he needed to do to beat defenders was shuffle the ball between his left and right foot and make the slightest of feints. Silva could even regularly get the ball out of trouble when pressed by multiple opposition. Because if he was indeed feeling the pressure,
that's what I noticed when I was doing my reaction to his highlight video, is that he was always dribbling in a crowd. Always dribbling in a crowd. Always got 3 defenders around him. Always got this swarm around him, and he was just getting out of trouble constantly.
His passing, playmaking, and vision could even give Xavi a run for his money. The way that he could send passes through traffic, attract opposition to press him, then find the open man to advance, or even just keeping possession going and building up play was truly just the slightest of margins behind Xavi. Silva was never really one to play long balls, but his mid-range crosses and passing were as accurate and creative as you could ever ask for. Plus, when it came to scoring goals and finishing, Silva was definitely better than Iniesta and Xavi. And some of you might crucify me for this, but if you compare Silva and Modric, I believe Modric only has Silva beat on the defensive end, stamina, set pieces, long ball passing, and long distance shooting. I even put out this poll asking who the better footballer was between Silva and his future teammate, Kevin De Bruyne. And I
mean, KDB is a great player. I've not watched long enough to really have have it down, but wow.
Personally, I think the only thing that KDB has on Silva is playing long-range balls, goal scoring, and physicality. Sure, Kevin De Bruyne is better at finding the direct assist, but Silva is the midfielder who builds the chances. And though his passing range was a lot shorter, Silva was able to do it all while building a play from any part of the pitch. Plus, I'd argue that now KDB has had the much better squad, but we'll talk more on that later. But while I do think that KDB is probably the greatest Premier League midfielder of his generation and probably on his way up there all time, I personally don't think he could do as well individually as Silva could, without such a strong attack and midfield, allowing him to do what he does best. Because Silva at an individual level, even playing for Spain, showed why he was one of the most important players in Spain's golden midfield. Because in the 2008 Euros, Silva was the perfect piece to basically make up for what his other midfield partners were lacking. Pacier than Iniesta, Xavi, and Xabi Alonso, being a far better dribbler than the latter two, while still having just as elite of vision, playmaking, and passing. But yet he was the only midfielder not playing for a glamorous club. And when they would go on to lift the 2008 Euros trophy, people did start to notice him, but still in such a star-studded squad playing just as well. In comparison, he was relatively unknown. But since then, slowly David Silva was starting to make a name for himself, not with his words or any publicity, but simply from his brilliance in La Liga. After playing a match against Real Madrid, even Florentino Perez was so impressed, he told the playmaker, "Take your suitcase to our locker room, because next year you'll be with us." But Silva at the time had remained loyal to the only club that noticed him from the beginning. It was only after the 2010 World Cup and Silva winning his second consecutive major international title with Spain that Valencia were finally looking to hike up his price and were open to selling him to wealthier clubs. But instead of joining Real Madrid, Manchester City would try their very hardest to try to convince Silva to join them, promising that he would be a central part of the organization's plans and that he would have their full support and dedication. With Silva recalling, "They bet very hard on me. I felt their trust and support from the first call. They told me how the project was going to be. Man City's ambition was to become one of Europe's biggest clubs." Funnily, at the time, even Pep Guardiola wanted him at Barcelona, saying, "I'd love to have him here." However, the club that landed David Silva was the rich club from Manchester. Just the fact that Silva had joined Man City was enough to convince Yaya Toure to also sign with the club.
There's another name I've got to react to. Yaya Toure. It's been requested multiple times. That video should be coming up soon.
As he understood and was fully aware of the sheer brilliance of the Spanish magician, knowing that if he was there, with the right pieces around him, Man City could definitely establish themselves as a big club. Just in his first season with the club, Man City would win the FA Cup, finally ending a 35-year trophy drought. Then in the 2011-2012 season, Silva was just beginning to reach the absolute prime of his physicality and playmaking. He would lead the Premier League in assists, playing a major factor in Man City winning their first Premier League title in history. In fact, before Aguero's iconic season-winning goal, it was Silva that provided the assist to put them level and kept them alive long enough to win. He even balled out in their 6-1 trashing of Man United, prompting Sir Alex Ferguson to say, "It was our worst ever day. It's the worst result in my history ever. Even as a player, I don't think I ever lost 6-1. Then in the 2012 Euros, although Iniesta was named the player of the tournament, it's not crazy to say that Silva was the most important midfielder in the squad, scoring a goal in the final against Italy, and even being Euro 2012's joint top assist provider, prompting manager Vicente Del Bosque to call David Silva Spain's version of Lionel Messi. But the thing about Silva compared to his other Spanish midfield greats is that his longevity was much better, especially playing so long in a physically tougher league. And stats alone don't reflect how important Silva was to City. If he wasn't providing the assist, he was always crucial in building up to the play and setting things in motion. He led the orchestra in Man City. His overall skill and performance in England was magical. And unlike many other great midfielders in the league like Mesut Ozil, Silva was far more consistent. And with City building a squad with Silva at the center of it all, they would start to slowly rack up silverware and respect. The 2017-18 season was probably David Silva's best, as City became the first team to finish with over 100 points in the Premier League, setting a record for the biggest disparity between champions and runner-ups in Premier League history. Silva also scored in that League Cup final win. It's definitely not wrong to say that Silva helped build Man City up to where they are today with his skill and playmaking wizardry. That's why teammates like Carlos Tevez say that David Silva is the best signing that Man City has ever made. Going from a team that was winning nothing to having 4 Premier League titles, 2 FA Cups, 5 League Cups, and 2 Community Shields. And while KDB did pick up where Silva left off, you have to remember, Silva was playing with a weaker squad at a time when he still had to battle it out against much better opposition, like the last of Ferguson's Man United sides, a prime Eden Hazard-led Chelsea, and a prime Liverpool. Deservedly so, they built him a statue. And heck, had he been playing in his prime early to mid 2010s form now, City probably could have even had back-to-back trebles. That's just how far better he is than guys like Bernardo Silva, Mahrez, Rodri, or Foden. Even from the age of 35 to 38, playing in his final few seasons in Real Sociedad, his body and physicality slowing down never really mattered because his ball control and playmaking was still magical. It took Silva rupturing a ligament in his knee in mid-2023 to finally decide to hang up his boots. For me, Silva is one of the greatest midfielders of all time, and certainly from a skill.
Gotta react to Gerrard as well. This video is basically over, so I'm gonna go ahead and end it here. Once again, I know that there was probably a lot of edits in there. He used a lot of game footage, and that's probably gonna get me copyright claimed a few times. But if you would like to see the unedited reaction to his game highlights, you can find that on Patreon. Once again, it's only $1 US dollar a month. If I could get 1,000 of my 25,000 subscribers, if I get 1,000 of you to join at $1 US dollar a month, if you fancy supporting the channel, I could really, really make this a full-time gig. In addition to all the other income that's coming through the channel. I really do appreciate you guys for even watching these videos. And if you're watching till now, you're the real MVP of the channel. And there's going to be a video somewhere up here that you might want to click one of those videos and watch another one. Please stay around. We appreciate you here on this channel. And I'll see you guys in the next video.